Good evening. My name is Sally Allen, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. I welcome you to our online forum featuring candidates for Ann Arbor City Council Ward 4. The candidates will be on the ballot in the primary election on Tuesday, August 4th. This year, the League of Women Voters is celebrating 100 years of expanding voter rights, educating voters, and shaping and influencing legislation at local, state, and national levels. We are so pleased to sponsor these forums. The League is a nonpartisan civic organization that encourages informed and active participation by all citizens in government. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and seeks to strengthen and broaden knowledge about our form of government and democracy. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take stands on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's program. Our moderator this evening is Peter Allen, and he will explain the format and get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Happy to be here. I am also a member of the League of Women Voters. It's my honor to introduce the three candidates running for Ann Arbor City Council from Ward 4. Jen Ayer, Jack Eaton, and Muzgan Savabibiastatiani. I hope I did a respectable job on that. Thank you, candidates, for participating with us. The forum today will have the following format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement for up to 90 seconds. In between, I'll ask about 6 questions which came from the Ann Arbor community. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. At the appropriate times, a sign on the screen will indicate the time remaining, 30 seconds, and then stop. If you've used up your time, you'll be allowed to finish your sentence, and then your microphone will be muted so that the other candidates have an equal opportunity to participate. The candidates will begin speaking in alphabetical order. Depending on the number of questions, all candidates will have an opportunity to be the first or last to answer the questions. We're now ready, Mr. Eaton, for your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you to the League for their century of service to our country. I'm Jack Eaton. I've lived in Ann Arbor for 35 years. I've been married to my wife for 32 years, and we have 2 adult children. I've had the privilege of representing the 4th Ward since 2013. I am proud of my record of listening to voters and representing their interests. This year, I believe the biggest issues we face are the proposals to raise city taxes during a recession and the proposal to relax zoning regulations to allow multi-unit buildings in our single-family neighborhoods. The city faces serious challenges from the recession, and I believe we must protect what is great about Ann Arbor while we resist the urge to increase financial burdens on our residents. I hope that you will agree our challenges call for the serious leadership and extensive experience that I have. Thank you.
Now, Jen Ayer.
Hi, I'm Jen Ayer, and thank you so much, everyone, for hosting this great event that is so educational for voters. I chose Ann Arbor to raise my family because we're a progressive community. We're a community that values diversity, that values protecting the environment, and that values taking care of the most vulnerable among us. These are core Ann Arbor values, and they're my values too. But we've been through a lot of changes in the past 20 years since I first moved here. And right now, Ann Arbor's at a crossroads. People are being priced out and left behind. The pandemic is hurting our local businesses and our city budget. Here in Ward 4, we have some big local issues that need addressing, like power outages and flooding. We need new leaders who will take bold, creative action to move us forward. In these times, the status quo just isn't an option. As a city council member, I will work to improve basic services like roads and water, and I won't back down from tough issues like affordable housing and climate change. I'm asking you to join me. Thank you.
And now, Muskan. Need to unmute, Muskan.
I'm Dr. Mojgan Sababi Esmahani. I am an environmental toxicologist. I have published dozens of articles on water contamination and water pollution and impacts of environmental contaminants on children. I stand for $15 minimum wage and immediate cleanup of Gilman dioxin contamination. This is a disturbing fact that Ann Arbor is actually sitting on a Superfund site. I want to see an immediate city cleanup of this toxin. I am also a human rights advocate. I have been fighting against racism since I arrived in New York City all those years ago. I have fought against the apartheid state of South Africa. I've fought against racism. I have joined multiple protests against police brutality. And I've also brought the resolution against military aid to Israel to City Council. These are difficult times, but what it has shown us is that we must turn to the public and away from the private. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. We're now ready for the questions. I'll be reading a question once, and it will not be repeated unless requested. To begin tonight, we'll start with Jen for the first question. Here it is. The questions we receive from community members fall into several key categories. Some have been around for a long time: housing, affordability, gentrification, environment. And based on some recent events, we now definitely come to the forefront some new issues such as safety and police reform, racial justice, diversity and inclusion, and the city budget challenges due to the pandemic. So here's the first question. Which of these areas do you think you have the most passion and the most capability to make a difference? Jen? Unmute.
Thank you. For me, one of the biggest, most important issues really is housing. All of these issues are so important, and I'm passionate about racial justice. I've been fighting for criminal justice reform since 2016. I'm concerned about the budget and the impact of COVID, and those are things that I will work on diligently. But if I have to choose one, I'm going to say for the long-term health of our city, housing is probably the issue that I'm most concerned about as a city. We have so many people, first of all, who would love to live here but can't. We have 84,000 people commuting into town every day. This has been a result of incredible job growth, but a lack of housing growth. And how we deal with that as a community is, in a responsible way where we can promote growth away from our neighborhoods, but concentrate it downtown and along our transit corridors in ways that will help improve the quality of life for folks who currently live here, because the less we have with people coming into town, the more we can reduce our traffic, especially if folks are concentrated around those transportation corridors. And also, improve the quality of life of those who would like to live here but can't afford to, those who work here, people who work in our service industries and at our hospital and other places. So there are a multitude of things that we need to do to address these issues. Some of it involves new market rate housing. Some of it involves funding housing, affordable housing, workforce housing for our population.
Thank you, Jen. Now, Muskan. Unmute, Muskan.
Okay. Affordable housing is definitely a serious crisis in Ann Arbor, and it has come about because 20 years of talking about it and virtually doing nothing about it. We have allowed the private developers to take a hold of most of our resources and develop it in their liking. We have ended up with virtually no public housing. We, at the same time, are spending millions of dollars. For example, $55 million spent on tree-lined urban trail in Ann Arbor. That money could have been used to build 600 units of public housing. It wasn't done. And I tell you why it hasn't been done, because working people, people of color, people of low income have virtually no representation on city council. I intend to be the voice of those people. So that's one thing about affordable housing. We cannot trust building of public housing in the hands of private developers. If Corona has taught us anything, it is that the needs of the public, the health needs of the public, housing needs of the public cannot be trusted to private developers or private healthcare system. I am also very serious about policing in Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor spends $13 million a year on policing of 120,000 people. This is outrageous. I would like to see a serious slash in the funding of the police. That funding that we use for the policing can fund, again, hundreds of public housing units. We need to move away from policing and make a community that cherishes and respects the public. We must invest in public housing and build public housing to fit the public. That's basically all I have. Thank you very much.
And Jack?
Thank you. My passion is being responsive to my constituents. When you first run for city council, there's a handful of issues that capture your attention. But the fact is that a council member must respond to all of these issues and every other issue that arises while they're serving. I believe that listening to residents and balancing the many different positions that they take is the fundamental function of a council member. And that's really what I enjoy doing. I, of course, emphasize environmental issues, labor issues, criminal justice reform, but in reality, there are hundreds of other issues that come before council, and you need to be able to listen to all of your constituents and weigh and balance all of their interests before you make a decision as to how to proceed. And I believe that I've done that over the 6.5 years that I've been on council. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for the next question. The first person to answer will be Mushkan. Here's the question. Daily headlines are getting worse regarding COVID-19. Ann Arbor will be experiencing a significant drop in city revenue as a result. What areas within the budget do you think could offer significant savings, but do not seriously compromise important programs and services? Mushkan?
Thank you so much. I believe that at the time of a pandemic, where we are looking into probably 100,000 people infected every day, pretty soon, this is a catastrophic situation, and the private healthcare system has totally failed in protecting our public. Now, at a time of a pandemic, it is brutal to be talking about cuts in city services and programs. We need to be thinking about actually putting together relief packages, economic relief packages for the families who are stuck between paying the rent or putting food on the table for their children. We must start thinking about how to fund those packages. At the same time, we are funding the police in huge amounts, 30 million a year. And I would like to see that slashed, in fact. And that fund can go into uses of the community, building community development, or things that can reinforce the bond between people of this town. And we must not think about cutting. We must think about providing relief to people who are facing this catastrophe. Again, I am thinking that police budget is a good place to start. we can start cutting that. We've also squandered a lot of money by spending it on things like this tree-lined urban trail. We have made wrong choices, and it is time that we make the right choices by providing packages to those who need it in this pandemic. It is a devastating time, and we must not abandon the poor. We must help them get through this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jack?
Thank you. The city is facing some significant economic challenges because of the pandemic-caused recession. We're fortunate to have Tom Crawford as our interim city administrator. Tom is 16 years as our chief financial officer, including bringing us through the last recession. He's identified $10 million worth of cuts in this next budget, which will not compromise our basic services and our essential infrastructure. But these cuts are just the first effort. As we proceed into this recession, we're going to see ever increasing needs to fund human services, both housing and food crises. So we'll be in the position where we have to make further cuts. And I believe that my experience with the city budget allows me to look for those things that are not essential so that we can maintain our services and maintain our infrastructure at the same time that we cut back on things that are just optional. For instance, we do a lot of contracting out to consultants. On this next city council budget, we have a $100,000 consulting contract to have somebody come in and establish a software package to oversee our capital improvement projects. That can be delayed without causing lasting harm. I also support the idea that we may in fact have to have a hiring freeze. As a last resort, probably staff cuts. But I don't believe that during the recession, we should be raising taxes or passing new millages. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Jen?
Thank you. The first thing I'll say about budgets is that they are moral documents. What a city decides to fund is a direct reflection of that city's values, or it should be. So this is even more stark and clear during a budget crisis like the one we will be facing. When faced with a budget shortfall, I believe Ann Arbor values mean that we will protect funding for programs that help the most vulnerable among us, first and foremost. And of course, we must protect funding for the basic services that ensure the health and safety of our residents. Beyond that, it's a matter of prioritization and triage, if you will. Delaying some capital projects, reducing debt-related expenses, voluntary furloughs, or a selective hiring freeze are all things that have been proposed by our interim city administrator. On the positive side, though, our budget was in better shape going into this pandemic than it has been in recent years, and that's the result of housing growth in the past decade. This growth has resulted in an additional $10.2 million this year alone for our city's general fund. Since developers pay for necessary infrastructure upgrades to service those residents, and residents themselves pay for their services via their taxes, this has been a net gain for our city. So, it's important to the city's financial health that we continue along the path of responsible growth, particularly downtown and along our transportation corridors and away from our neighborhoods. And, I just want to add too that I have budget experience going back many organizations, the county board as commissioner, to a large organization like MLive where I was a director, to the Dickin PTO and the co-op preschool where I served as president for both organizations, and currently to my small business. And that experience will be put to good use on the city council.
Thank you, Jen. Now on to the next question. Jack, you'll be the first to respond. Here's the question. Most communities are becoming much more aware that racial bias is built into virtually every system in the United States. And while Ann Arbor takes pride in winning many Best City to Live in awards, It ranks poorly in income inequality and is identified as an economically segregated area. Please share your ideas on how City Council can identify and combat systemic racism in our community. Jack?
Thank you. I believe that we could begin by diversifying council itself. In the past, I've tried to recruit and supported minority candidates for council. My record on council is one of civil rights. One of the first things I co-sponsored was a ban the box resolution that affirmatively stated that we, as a city employer, will hire people with a criminal record. I have sponsored an ordinance to protect immigrants and their communities. For the last 5 years, I've worked diligently to get us a meaningful, powerful, independent police oversight commission. I'm proud that I was part of picking a new reform-minded police chief. I'm also proud that we're working to diversify our police department. I've supported the cooperation that we have with the counties, with the county on the One Community Equity Initiative. Again and again, when we have an opportunity at council to do something that will serve our minority communities and the community at large, I've been there as a co-sponsor, a sponsor, and a supporter. I'm proud of my record. I believe that we need to recognize that issues like housing are regional. And so when you say that we're an economically segregated community, it's really our whole county that's segregated. It's not just the city of Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor is by no means the wealthiest community in this county. And we have to work cooperatively with other communities to address our regional needs, including housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Jen?
Thank you. I believe government has a big role to play in promoting racial justice throughout our community. You know, local government historically has played a big role in creating racial injustice, and now we must take steps to remedy that. Ann Arbor has taken many steps already, but there is so much more work that we need to do. Diversity is actually in our city's mission statement, and that's because it's a core Ann Arbor value. I believe that we must pursue diversity and equity in everything we do as a city, in housing, in transportation, in the environment, and how we handle the environment and pollution, in the justice system, in representation on city staff and boards and commissions, and more. Criminal justice in particular is an issue that I've been working on for many years. When I left the Ann Arbor News in 2016 and moved into communications, my first client was actually the ACLU of Michigan, helping them to create and launch their Smart Justice campaign. In Ann Arbor here, we have a fantastic partner in Chief Cox, who frequently says that policing, or the police don't own policing, the public owns policing. So some specific things that I would do is explore expanding the responsibilities and the oversight of the Police Oversight Commission, support a thorough review and revision of use of force measures, reject attempts to add police officers for proactive policing, as Mr. Eaton did during the budget process last year, champion efforts to divert people from jail and into necessary social services programs, advocate for new training to reduce potentially hostile interactions between police and citizens, and maintain the city's refusal to cooperate with ICE and increase protections for undocumented immigrants here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Muskan?
Thank you. Despite everything that Mr. Eaton and Ms. Iyer say, what has happened in Ann Arbor for the past 20 years has made this town much more segregated than it has ever been. We live in a fully segregated community. Many people of color, many Black people have been pushed out of Ann Arbor because of the luxury housing that Ms. Iyer so much loves is out of touch. They cannot reach those luxury housings. They are not just new housings, they are luxury housing out of reach of many people who lived here. They've had to move out. So we have this massive problem of segregation. How do we remedy that? There is ways to do it. For example, the University of Michigan has pledged to have 10% Black enrollment. That was 50 years ago. And to this day, that is not happening. The city can get together with the University of Michigan and make that happen. They've got multiple projects going together. This can be one of them, to encourage Black students to enroll in Michigan, go through the university and get good jobs and be installed at good places so they can change the picture in this town. There's other things we can do. We can empower programs, right, like neutral zone job corps program, which helps mentor students, helps them get into college, and helps them get a good job afterwards. We can expand that. That is a tiny project, and it can be much, much bigger to allow more people to use it. These are some of the things we can do. And the racism in our systems is systemic. It is something that cannot be done by addressing a little bit of things at the City Council. We must look closely at how our housing infrastructure is set up. And I hope that we can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Muskan. Next question, we'll lead off with Jen. Here's the question. Now that the City Council unanimously adopted the 820 carbon neutrality plan, what are the most important next steps that City Council should take to implement it? Jen?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm really happy that that finally did go through after some hemming and hawing on the part of City Council, because it's really important that we adopt this plan and allow our folks in the Office of Sustainability to get moving on this work. I've had many discussions with Dr. Stultz and others about the 820 plan. And as I understand, next year's activities are, they're going to center all around residential conversion to energy efficiency. This is really exciting work, and Council can, do its part by continuing to provide the funding for the work to continue. I was disappointed when Councilmember Eaton and others voted to once again take away the stable multi-year source of funding for our climate action plan last month. And thankfully it survived, the mayor vetoed that effort. So specifically, I think we're going to be looking next year at seeing some packages put together to do that residential conversion to energy efficiency. I understand that the work is going to begin with low-income residents and providing help and grants for them to convert their residences, and then the market rate sort of higher income folks will follow. This is really exciting work. It involves developing a community solar program as well. Establishing a bulk purchase program so residents and businesses can get on-site renewables for a discounted price. These are all really exciting things already in the budget for 2021, and I fully support these activities.
Thank you, Jen. Next, Muskan, please.
Thank you so much. Of course, it is incredibly important to make sure we remove our carbon footprint. The whole of the Western world has been extremely consumerist way of life that the Western world has created this condition. And the result of it will make the people in the third world suffer greatly. And I'm very glad that this 820 proposal has gone through. I'm very glad about it. And if it is completely successful, if everybody uses solar panels, if all that there's predicted in there is actually accomplished, more bike rides, more transportation, more electric buses, if all of that is accomplished, and I hope that it will still take a very small bite out of our carbon footprint in reality, even though it sounds in Ann Arbor that we are trying to remove our carbon footprint. It wouldn't be, because we are a part of a bigger society where the Department of Defense in this country is the largest producer of greenhouse gases. And we must face that fact. We must see what our share is in the amount of funds that from our taxes goes to the Department of Defense. So to actually pretend basically that what we do in Ann Arbor suffices to remove our carbon footprint is basically fooling ourselves. We need to be much more bold, much more courageous, and look far deep into what we are as a society in order to be able to successfully remove our carbon footprint. I propose that we look carefully to see how much we contribute to the US Department of Defense, which is basically an organization that kills people. And we want to make sure we don't contribute to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Muskan. Jack?
Well, thank you. So I'm proud to have offered the amendment to our climate emergency resolution that moved our carbon neutrality goal from 2035 to 2030, and that was adopted unanimously by Council. That resolution also asked for a draft plan to accomplish that goal, which resulted in the A20 plan. Fundamentally, we have to recognize that the A20 plan is what Dr. Stoltz calls a living document. It will go through modification as we go and learn from our experience. For example, most of the carbon reduction in the first 5 years of the plan is attributable to actions by the University of Michigan. The later carbon reduction relies on changes to laws that will necessitate cooperation from the Republicans in the state Senate. I want to point out that while I have debated what source of funds we should use for our carbon neutrality goals, that doesn't reduce our commitment. The 40-40-20 resolution committed $880,000 to climate action. This year's budget is $1.8 million. So without regard to where that money comes from, we're spending far more than what was provided through the rebate from the mental health millage. I believe that we must measure our success on carbon neutrality, not by how much we spend, but on how much we reduce our carbon output. That we'll be assisted in that effort because we insisted that the Office of Sustainability report back to Council quarterly on their progress to reduce carbon. I'm proud of my work on these issues, and thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Next question. Muskan, you'll be the first to answer this question. In canvassing your constituents, what seems to be their most important concerns? Laurel.
Thank you so much. I spoke to some people when I had a chance, and I think the one thing that in my campaign really appeals to a lot of people in Ward 4 is the $15 minimum wage. This is not a luxury, it is a necessity at this stage. Even if people make $15 minimum wage in Ann Arbor, they would be forced to spend 3 weeks of their monthly income on their rent. This is how badly this community has been impacted by private developers that build luxury housing. The $15 minimum wage is a necessity for Ann Arborites if they have a family to feed. So the thing that has been quite resonating with the public here is $15 minimum wage. And I am, to my knowledge, the only candidate in the entire city of Ann Arbor who has pushed for $15 minimum wage. And I intend to continue pushing for it. And if there are obstacles in its way, I am determined to remove them because our public needs it. It is not a luxury. People need it to pay their rent, to pay their childcare, to pay their transportation, and we need to do it. If there are obstacles in its way, I am prepared to fight and remove them. I know that Mr. Eaton, for the 7 years that he's been on the council, has paid no attention to this serious matter. There are examples of very successful $15 minimum wage successes in the United States. More than 30 cities across the United States are paying workers $15. The most successful example is Seattle, which is paying their workers $15 an hour, and that has actually enhanced the local economy because it has released money into the hands of people who are now able to spend it, and the whole of the economy has improved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jack, please.
Thank you. What I find when I talk to voters is that they want a city government that listens to them. This community has very intelligent residents. They don't want council members who believe they know better than the residents. The issues that come up in particular, though, are taxes, our roads, the very basic things that a government is responsible for providing to its citizens. Our community has good liberal values. They want aspirational goals such as carbon neutrality, affordable housing, and police reform. But they don't want those things to be at the expense of the basic services and the essential infrastructure that are core to the government's responsibility to its residents. So I believe the biggest issue is that voters want to be listened to, and they want council to act upon their concerns and not pretend that they know better than what voters know. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen?
Thank you. Well, when I talk to voters, I do hear about some of the other things that we've been talking about: police reform, affordable housing, climate action. But I want to talk about some very specific local issues that voters in Ward 4 are frustrated with. And they're frustrated with council, not because council doesn't listen, but they're frustrated with council because council doesn't act. They're not taking action, and they're frustrated with their council members for it. So some specific issues: obviously roads are a big one that happens across the city, but I propose that we should, at this point, consider using the city's bonding authority to take advantage of low-cost borrowing and put people back to work on infrastructure projects without raising taxes. They want complete streets that are safe and equitable for all members of our community. I will support adding bike lanes that are protected whenever possible, filling sidewalk gaps, and adding traffic safety measures, something that this current council has voted down several times over the past year or two. For example, I recently went on a walking tour of Lawton neighborhood with several parents who are very concerned about increased traffic and traffic patterns changing around the school. It's become so dangerous that they can't even have student crossing guards anymore. I will work with residents on these types of issues, and I will keep working until we get solutions. And flooding. Residents are frustrated with the continued flooding and the lack of action on those retention ponds that were supposed to be built to hold water in the Mallets Creek Drainage District. I'm somebody who's had a flooded basement, been through the footing drain disconnect program. I know how frustrating it is, and I will take action on it. And finally, power outages. We lose power in the 4th Ward with a frequency that is absolutely unacceptable. I will work with the Michigan Public Services Commission to compel DTE to make the necessary upgrades to its infrastructure so that we have reliable power once again.
Thank you, Jen. We're already to the last question. Jack, you'll be the leadoff here. Here's the question. The Greenbelt millage designates 1/3 of the proceeds for the acquisition of parkland within the city limits. Due to the lack of recent parkland acquisition within the city limits, the city portion of the fund has now accumulated a $6 to $7 million balance. Our city has 163 parks spanning 2,188 acres. Should this fund balance be used to acquire additional parkland while there's still land available, or does Ann Arbor already have enough parks and a better use for the money? Jack?
Thank you. That's a good question. So actually, we have some ambitious park-like projects on the horizon, including the tree line plan, the tree line trail. But there are some opportunities within the city that we are aware of as a horizon issue, but that we will need to have money set aside for in addition to the tree line trail. I don't believe that we have too many parks. I think that that's one of the things that our residents most enjoy about our town. Almost every neighborhood has a neighborhood park or one within close walking distance. And we struggle to maintain them, but nonetheless, they're just the jewels of our neighborhoods. It's what makes our neighborhoods attractive to new residents. It's what makes them walkable and enjoyable. So I believe that there are some opportunities on the near horizon and the far horizon where we won't have any trouble spending that money. And I think it will add to our park system very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Jen?
Yes. So it's a great question. It was actually the passage of the Greenbelt in 2003 that was one of the key reasons that I decided, it really cemented my decision to stay here in Ann Arbor and to raise my family. It was such a progressive move for the city to make. The idea of preserving agricultural land outside the city in order to fight sprawl, in order to protect local farms that provide us with access to healthy, locally grown food. It's really important. It's a 30-year program. And so the current balance isn't really a surplus. It's like a bank account. And we save the funds until we find a strategic parcel to purchase. And of course, 2/3 of the funds are supposed to be spent on land outside the city, hence the Greenbelt name. When it comes to new park acquisition, I think it's really important to first keep in mind that our current park system is already strained. Residents know this because their neighborhood parks aren't kept up, they aren't mowed as often as they used to be, certainly when I first moved here. And upgrades are slower to happen as well. So we have to be very strategic about our purchases. I would say that purchases related to the tree line trail would be an obvious good choice. And then we should also look at opportunities to strategically purchase parcels, for example, that could greatly enhance our existing parks. So if you had a park where the entryway was just a small sidewalk in between houses, if a parcel came up next to the park that would provide a better, more accessible entryway to that park, that would be a good choice. Overall, I appreciate the Greenbelt initiative. I think that we're doing a good job with it. And I think we just need to be very strategic about adding any new parks at a time when our system is already strained.
Thank you, Jen. And Muskan, please.
Thank you so much for this question. Again, I want to go back and tell everyone how I feel about refocusing and readjusting our needs in this town. We live on top of a large contamination. Gilman dioxin contamination is the largest it has been. We are receiving PFAS toxins in our water. We have been for the past 2 years. This is what I mean by adjusting ourselves to the problems that are at hand. We don't have public housing. Thousands of people are forced to wait for vouchers. At a time like this, I like parks the best, just like the next guy, but I think to dwell on those kinds of funds for those kinds of activities really baffles me. We need to focus on clean water to drink. We need to clean up this Gilman dioxin contamination. The $55 million that they spent on Tree Line Urban Trail could be used to clean up the Gilman dioxin contamination immediately, completely, forever. No more 30 years of waiting, no more begging the EPA to come and clean it up. They won't. That 55 million can give us multiple, more than 600 units of public housing. Ann Arbor, we need to refocus, we need to think carefully and readjust our priorities. As I said, I like parks just like the next person, but this is time where we must address much bigger problems that the city has failed to address for the past 30 years, hobnobbing with polluters and surrounding ourselves with old party hacks is not going to deliver us from the ditch that we have dug ourselves into with the help of the mayor and the city council members.
Thank you, Ms. Khan.
Reprioritize.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. We're now ready for the closing statements. We'll begin with Jack Eaton. Jack?
Thank you. And thank you to the League for this opportunity to reach voters. The city is facing serious challenges. This is not the time for on-the-job training. Neither of my challengers have been elected to a local office. Neither has served a full term of office. Neither has served during deliberations on a local governmental budget. There's no simple or magical solution to the budget shortfalls the city faces. I've served on Ann Arbor City Council for 6.5 years through 7 budget processes. I understand the budget. I know the basic services and essential infrastructure the city must fund. I will identify the budget items that are not urgent or necessary that can be cut, delayed, or reduced, even those that I've supported in the past. I have a long record in office, and it's likely that you disagree with me on one or more of my votes. But I believe that if you look at my full record, you will see that I've tried to balance the different views of my constituents. The city will have about $10 million less in funding than expected next year. Addressing these shortfalls will require steady, experienced council members who can weigh the competing interests and provide the best services possible. Please visit my website to learn more about me and my campaign, eatonforcouncil.com. Voters have an important choice to make in this election. I hope that you'll vote for me on or before August 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen?
Thank you. Well, I grew up in a working family, the daughter of an IBEW electrician and a registered nurse. My parents were and still are, frankly, politically minded, and they raised me to understand how public policies affected our daily life. I've always been drawn to public service. It's why I became a journalist and worked at the Ann Arbor News and MLive for 16 years. I currently work as a Democratic communications leader, fighting for progressive change. I helped Governor Gretchen Whitmer get her campaign launched as her spokeswoman. And I currently advocate on behalf of labor unions and public schools. I'm running for city council because Ann Arbor is at a crossroads. And we need more than the status quo. We need new leaders who will take bold, creative action to move us forward. I want to take a moment to thank the hundreds of people who've gotten involved in my campaign so far. 300 plus individual donations, the vast majority of which are from Ann Arbor and Ward 4. Dozens of active volunteers helping me reach out to voters in many ways. I hear from new supporters every day, and they're excited about having new energy and new ideas on council. I ask you for your vote. Please visit votegenier.com to learn more and to get involved in the campaign. I hope that you'll join me so that together we can lead Ann Arbor forward.
Thank you, Jen. And Muskan?
Thank you so much. I am here to be the voice for the people of color, for working people and low-income people in Ann Arbor. That voice is virtually missing on Ann Arbor City Council. I am the only woman of color running for Ann Arbor City Council Ward 4, and I am the only one who is running on her own dime. I have accepted no donations, no campaign contributions, because I want to be completely independent when I make my choices in favor of the working people. In contrast, Ms. Iyer is sitting atop a mountain of contributions. She has surrounded herself with old party hacks who are responsible to deliver us to this ditch that we are in right now. So I would like to encourage you to take your distance from those old party hacks that have brought us here, where our water is contaminated, where our rent is too high, and where the city is most segregated it has ever been. It is the policies of these old party hacks that have delivered us here. Let's take a distance from them. I am proposing $15 minimum wage. I am proposing public housing, and I am proposing cleanup of Gelman dioxin contamination, immediate cleanup of Gelman dioxin contamination. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muskan. Thanks to all of you. That was wonderful. Great job. I will now turn this over to Sally for her closing statements from the league.
The league thanks all the Ward 4 candidates for participating in tonight's forum and to all those who contributed questions. All our candidate forums will be available for streaming on your computer and your smartphones. Go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the link to the programs. In addition, the forums can be viewed on CTN. For additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org, which is the League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and federal candidates and current proposals that will appear on your ballot. You go right to this website, put your address in, and up pops all of the races that you will be voting in and any ballot issues. Each candidate has been asked questions and they've had an opportunity to write their answers on that website, and it's very interesting to go online and read about all the candidates that you'll be voting for. With the passage of Proposal 3 in 2018, all voters are now eligible to vote absentee. So there's no reason not to vote in this year's primary election. In addition, you can register to vote and vote right up to the day of the election. So just remember, no matter how you do it, make sure you vote in the August 4th primary election. It's so important. Thank you.